Hi, noticers. It's Urvi and Maggie here again with a very wonderful guest, Matt Gerlach. And we're so excited to hear his story and to probe into what created the courage within him to be himself. And Matt and I actually met in an entrepreneurial community that we're a part of, and he shared his story with me. And I thought, yes, you have to be here with us in conversation to talk about your meaningful healing journey and also what you're creating from that and the tools and the way you have navigating just being who you want to be today. So we're like very excited. We're going to go deeper into that. But Maggie, I know you're going to share a little bit about Matt right now.
I love your theme, and I'm just only going to share a few things from what I've picked out from going over your bio and your website, which is that you were highly successful externally, right? Running your own entrepreneur, running your own business, and then you kind of had this point of maybe burnout or breakdown where you realized the external abundance was not equating to internal abundance, which is a very important message. And now you are still an entrepreneur and an author, and you are helping people find that balance between internal and external abundance is what I've gathered, which I love that message. And I would love for you to add anything on top of that we missed, if you don't mind,
Uh,
Matt.
yeah, thank
Yeah.
you for the warm introduction and your enthusiasm. And I'm just so happy to be here today. So thank you. Wow. I mean, I think you covered it. Yeah, I mean, really, my story is one from breakdown to breakthrough and learning who I was, learning what made me tick, and learning what I wanted out of life. And it's really, really remarkable to be on the other side of this. I came from horrible anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation, and I'm careful to say this, but because I don't want to, I don't know that anxiety won't come back one day or something. But right now, I mean, I don't feel anxiety like at all, and it's crazy. And this is what happens when you learn how to listen to yourself and honor what you need.
Yes. Yes.
Absolutely. We're like, say it more. No,
No.
absolutely. Yeah, we're just soaking that up. And I feel like that is just such a strong outcome for the journey that you have been on. And we would love to hear more about just what that journey looked like for you from, and you really aptly coined it as like breakdown to breakthrough. I think that's
Mm.
powerful in and of itself. So what is it, when did you know? There's so many questions I have, and I want to know about, what the healing journey looked like for you specifically. But almost before that, what prompted you? Like, what was that breakdown point? Like, take us back kind of to that time and like how it was manifesting for you in that period of your life.
Sure, I'm really excited to share the story. So I moved to New York in 2010 from Los Angeles, which is where I'm from, and I was living a lovely life in New York. I met my partner David. Him and I have been together for 11 years now, and I was working in the baby product space, so in sales for baby product innovations. It's random, but like lovely industry. Was very underdeveloped until about 2010. And it kind of is like, like a lot of this innovation happened in New York where even rich people still had small apartments and didn't want to look at a Winnie the Pooh diaper bag like in their apartment. They wanted something a little bit more designed. And so I'd been in this industry for about 7 years, 6 years at the point when I was laid off of a job. And it wasn't like that traumatic for me. I mean, I'd always been a good saver. I had made good money at the time. But this is really kind of interesting that this has come out of me lately as I'm still very much in the process of, I shouldn't say very much, but I'm in the process. There's still enlightenment that's happening consistently about the process. And I did not know mental and emotional health mattered. Like I literally had no idea that that mental or emotional health could weigh somebody down. I mean, it just I'm smiling because it's just like how could I have not known that? And I know I'm not alone. I mean, I know a lot of people probably don't know that either. So I was laid off of this job, and I it was kind of at the point where I was like growing in a different way. Like I had had sort of a rough childhood, a rough adolescence, and I found drinking at 16, and it never got crazy out of hand, but drinking was a big part of my life. And I think around this point, I was learning that like it causes anxiety too, and it's not really something that you can do for your whole life. And so I was starting to feel these changes, and then the layoff happened, and I did not know what to do with my life. I never really had been happy in a career before, and I always thought something was wrong with me. Out of college, I sold metal during college. I worked at a hospital as a monitor technician, watching heart monitors. So like I'd had all these like really like kind of hard jobs and they're kind of random jobs, and I've been very successful. So I knew it when I was laid off. I didn't want to work for somebody else again, and that was kind of like the one thing that I could like hang my hat on that I was like pretty certain about. So I started a consulting agency helping baby product brands. I wasn't really sure what I was going to help them with exactly, but helping small and medium baby product brands with the skills that I had. And it was off to a good, I mean, I enjoyed it I enjoyed it. Like it was challenging. I mean, I was seeing myself succeed. I mean, honestly, like they say, like I don't know, most businesses work for a long time without making money, and probably month 2 or 3 I had already made like $15,000 a month. Like that was my reoccurring revenue. So I was doing really well. And coming from like the side of the business where I was um like my job is selling physical products. So as my own business being just selling services, so much easier. I mean, I started the business with just a computer. And anyone out there thinking about starting a business, I mean, starting a services business is there's not a lot of risk needed to do something like that. Anyhow, so when I started this business, I quickly learned that I quickly learned something was wrong, and I started feeling horrible. The stress was something I could not handle. I had no ability to set boundaries. I no way to identify my needs, and I had no ability to discern what sort of work or clients I would do work for, and it started literally killing me. And I went to the doctor. I was convinced that something was wrong with my physical health. I mean, no one really knew what. I mean, they were like, I mean, I was going to see a regular doctor. That was like, well, the regular doctor checks for regular health problems. And my blood pressure was high. That sort of sent me in a frenzy because she was like, I'm not that concerned. You're 27 years old. I'm not that concerned about your blood pressure right now, and it's not that high. I was very concerned, and my partner and I decided to move from New York to LA at this point. We had been talking about it for a while. So it's like all of this stress is happening, starting a new business on a plane, literally at least once a week, if not 2 or 3 times a week. Let's move to LA. And this was all happening. And I'm just like going with it, thinking, and I'm out drinking all the time. That was a huge part of my success in business, was that I was a excellent networker and excellent schmoozer, and I had a lot of friends in New York, and we were having a lot of fun on the weekends, and I was doing this all, and I just had no idea that any of this could debilitate a person. So I moved to LA, and so we landed at LAX at like 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and went to our apartment. We had already found the apartment, and a couple hours into the unpacking process, I started feeling dizzy. Checked my blood pressure; it was 190 over 110. Called my doctor. She was like, "You need to go to the hospital." I went to the hospital, and they said that they're concerned that I'm having a heart attack. And I spent my first night in LA in the hospital alone, checked into like the upstairs room. And I knew something was wrong. I mean, I knew I had to like get help with this. I didn't want to. I knew I needed to try to figure out what was going on. And I was seeing medical doctor after medical doctor. I was in therapy and everything too. I've been in therapy for most of my adult life. I would love to know what we talked about in therapy the first 10 years, because I have no idea. But I certainly wasn't open to hearing anything about like my my upbringing having provoked these sorts of mental health challenges. And so I'm seeing doctor after doctor, and finally a neurologist told me, he's like, Matt, I've seen this a million times. What's going on is anxiety. And
Wow.
I started, I was in yoga teacher training. So I was doing a lot of the right things. I was in acupuncture. I was learning to meditate. And
Mhm.
I mean, this wasn't debilitating at the time. And then about 9 months after I was in the hospital, I started having panic attacks while driving that did completely debilitate me. And, I say this with humility now, but it's like looking back at all this, I did I did a lot of it to myself, like the worrying, like a panic attack happens, I thought I was dying. Like I thought I had a brain tumor. And had I just known it was a panic attack, I probably could have like not been debilitated from driving for gosh, like almost 3 years. Like I mean I drove a little bit, but more often than not I get behind the wheel and have to call an Uber to pick me up. And
Wow.
so this went on for a while, and I went on this healing journey and realized that underneath all of this was childhood trauma that happened, and that I just over the years had learned to not, I had no love for myself. I thought I was a broken person. And I think like being in a relationship also, I'm very fortunate that I did find a good relationship that
Mm.
and I think that was provoking the growth. Like I was with somebody who
Mhm.
actually wanted to know the real me, and
Mhm.
I didn't know the real me. So
Mhm. Wow. That's so beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing all that. There was so much that was coming to me as you were speaking, but so much of it was relatable to me. For one, I had a New York City party phase of my own life, but I think that there's so much because there's a lot of glamour, right? Like you have outward success, you New York City, like young in your 20s, like finding success in corporate and then starting your own business, which I think is very romanticized to a lot of people who are in a job they don't feel any creative expression or they don't really feel, so even like entrepreneurship is very romanticized, but then starting that and still feeling like, okay, like what is up with this? But the body tries to tell us over and over again. And I just think that that piece of it, in addition to, this like therapy, the body was trying to tell you for so many years that you were just not totally aligned in what you were doing. And the ways that we convince ourselves, right, that that's not the case is just, I had a similar story, but I think I was thinking of so many friends as you were speaking to who could relate to what you were saying, just in terms of like, even now they're like, my stomach is like in knots when I go to work. I'm like, that's not normal. Like we shouldn't keep normalizing this. Um, and I also wanted to touch on the point where you felt, because it sounds like you were kind of like trying, like it's like there was a couple of years where you were like, oh, I think I'm doing all the right things. Like I'm trying to like learn new things. I'm trying yoga. I'm like trying some new things, but I'm still having these anxiety attacks. Like, do you know what was sort of the moment where where it was something clicked, where it was like, this is about healing, kind of like the somatic almost. That's what I'm hearing, and like, totally disagree. But like, there's a somatic, like there's a real physical. This isn't just about like the mind and like that talking about it. There's a somatic element to this. Like, was there a moment where you realized like you really just had to go deeper in that?
yeah, good questions. And yeah, like I would say that there definitely wasn't one moment where everything clicked,
Hmm.
but there were a few moments that
Hmm.
stood out. One of them, probably the most pronounced. This all started happening. I mean, it was a gradual process. So, like, about 2 years after moving to LA, it finally, like, it started to, like, I really started to open up. And it was through yoga teacher training was a big part of that. I very fortunately, I think yoga teacher training is different all around. There's, some that are a lot more in movement. I had a very philosophical teacher who I love to this day very, very much. And we're, just talking. I never really had been in a room before with people that had opened up about their feelings. And that was a big part of it for me. And I journaled like during yoga teacher training, like, we're talking and, we're there for 4 hours and 3 hours of it's philosophical discussions. And I would be journaling the whole time. I called it TTCU, things that came up. And I just like, I
Yeah.
have hundreds of pages of this. And I mean, and I've looked back at some of them a lot, and it's like I started to really like there was one thing, like the holidays were coming up, and I like wrote like I feel not thrilled about going to holidays with my family the way that they are, and then like I kept going. why, Matt? Why, Matt? Why? And then I started to see like, oh, like, I mean, I'm not like, I don't feel appreciated, or I don't feel really loved, So like that was happening. And so that was kind of going on one end. And then probably the big breakthrough moment, if I was to say there was one, was my partner and I were in couples therapy, and which was so helpful. Like, we went to I mean, and that's, I think, why we've been together for 11 years, because we spent half of the relationship in couples therapy, and we're probably going to I mean, we probably will go back one day. I mean, things happen, but we identified in couples therapy that I could not ask him for what I needed. And big breakthrough there. Like, I ended up in tears, and we had this couples therapist that was just like fantastic. Like, I think that's sort of the challenge sometimes with like traditional therapy. There is sometimes a lot of like, how do you feel about it? Well, I mean, I don't know how I feel about it. This has been my whole life. I feel like this is normal. And I'm very lucky that like all of the therapists that I'd worked with kind of got a little bit like, I'm going to tell you what I think, because you seem to like really need some help here. And like, I mean, it started to get to the point where it was like, Matt, like some of this stuff that's happened is pretty traumatic, and you can't ask for what you need. And like, what you've said is because like, it sounds like there's stuff in childhood that made you have a lot of disdain for your needs. So that was kind of the moment where this all started making sense. And like, I would have bet $1 million, like literally, I'm not even exaggerating, at like 34, 35, I would have bet $1 million. I wouldn't have lived to see I'm 40. Like, that's how bad things were. So this wasn't like, I want to like poke holes and see what's going on. This is like, I'm dying. And if I don't get help right now to like understand why I feel as though I'm dying, I'm going to die. And it's very much like what you said about like the knots in your stomach. Like, I think about it like on Sundays sometimes, I don't have the knots in my stomach at all anymore. And I did for most of my life.
And it's liberating, right? So to be able to be in a position, right? And I say that, and I don't say it lightly. Like, there is, to Maggie's point, even being able, what I call designing your own life. So like being in an entrepreneurial space, right? Like, there is headache, heartache, blood, sweat, tears. Like, there's a lot that comes with that space, but there's also some, when you can learn to navigate it, there is a lot of liberation. But I don't think the liberation can occur just because you've decided that you are going to be on your own, or just because you decided you were going to design your own life. It comes because I loved that you shared this part where you said, your therapist, or what came up was that you don't share what you need. And I want to even extend that, because it's like, we don't share what we need with ourselves inward. Like, we don't even ask that question inwards. And when to the point that we were talking about somatic, it's like, the body heals, the body tells, the body shares. Like, it is constantly the first line defense for you for everything. And it's like, we don't have that capacity to go inward enough to find, like, for lack of better, like the miracles or the resource or the tools that exist, for us, and they're already at our disposal. And so it's so fascinating that you said that way, because I also am in therapy. I hope everybody eventually finds themselves to that, supportive, and a supportive therapist, I will say as well, because I feel like that is also a new finding of mine. And it's like so interesting, because I think, there's, if anyone, and I feel a little sense of this coming from you, is like, I don't feel like I had many trauma, like small T traumas. I don't think I had big T traumas. I don't think I had many small T traumas. But what my therapists and what those discussions have demonstrated for me is like, the body is always keeping score, to use the wonderful books, right? Like, the body's always keeping score. And actually, the body kept score at the mere age of 0. But we, so from 0 to 3, we've actually formed a lot of core memories, because that was the only time that our body that was the only thing that was keeping track, because our mind couldn't make sense of the world, right? And so but our body could. And so it's very hard for us to go back because we don't have cognitive memory, but our body has somatic memory, right? And so that was a fascinating point that came to me in my own therapy where I was like, oh, and she, one of my points in that time of life was like 0 to 3. We immigrated to America from India. And she said, even though you didn't feel like that was something that impacted you because cognitively it didn't, you took in all of that. And so you can and should sit with that. And that's not to always glean the negative. That's just to say to your body, like, I hear you, right? Like, I understand you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm so grateful that you are talking so much about somatic experiencing, because that was probably one of the biggest pieces of my healing journey. I did work with a somatic therapist for probably, gosh, maybe about 2 years, and it was being in the body. And similarly to that, like I learned that well, I mean, I knew this, but I learned this was traumatic. Like I was an emergency C-section with the umbilical cord wrapped around my neck and like stuff like that. I mean, that's like really traumatizing. And then my mom tried to breastfeed me and couldn't. And I want to make sure I extend compassion. I know a lot of women really have a lot of guilt about that. And I think my mom did all she could and it didn't work. And I know that there's like a lot of like that in and of itself, there's a certain sort of trauma there. And I think like, it makes me want to say like trauma happens, things happen, but I think like there's so much power in talking about it, like, and that's what you're like that's what you're like, are talking about it, bringing it to the surface. It's not like, oh, like something's wrong that you immigrated here. It's like, let's have compassion for you. Let's have compassion for yourself, for that part of your story, right? Because that is jarring. I mean, right. These things, I'm always hesitant to say this, and I'm looking forward to the day when I get more comfortable saying it. But like, I do think we all have some sort of trauma, and it is, I mean, I don't want to like project that too much, but it's like, I think we all were told something that like was something that stuck with us as a child, like, hey, put that dessert back. You've had enough, or something like that. Not the end of the world, but like, that could have facilitated, I mean, that's kind of stuff without the proper recognition of it does lead to limiting beliefs and self-worth issues and self-esteem issues, So it's like, I think we all kind of are working with something that we tried to make sense out of as a child with very limited ability to make sense out of things.
And I think no, thank you for saying that, because I think that is an important message to hear, because a lot of people downplay, like, they're in this comparison and it's like, oh, well, I didn't have this extreme thing happen to me, so like I should have no reason to feel X, Y, or Z, when it's exactly like you said, like it's a very formative, 0 to 7 base, it forms how we relate to the world. Like that's also what I've gleaned from a lot of therapy and therapists. That's just the name. It's not the blame game. It's just the name of the game. Like our world is shaped at those years, and we learn very like how to relate to people. What does it take to get love? Like we learn that love becomes conditional at a certain age, where when you do this, you get the smile. When you do that, you get the yell, and then we just stay that way. I think a lot of us. That was a part of my journey as well, is like understanding that it mattered that whatever I was feeling was valid, right? Like I always felt like I didn't have a right to feel sad because nothing super serious, happened to me. But it just allowing myself to feel in general was a really challenging thing for me. But I love what you said, Matt, and I agree with you. And I think it's not like, oh, let's normalize or celebrate trauma in any way, but it's just saying like, hey, like this thing that has happened to us at some point, it stayed with you. And that's more of what I consider trauma, is that it's in you, right? We're talking a lot, we mentioned a lot about somatic, but this thing has shaped you. This has lived within you. And now it's just a matter of recognizing it, showing it some love so that it can breathe and release, And I would love to hear. Yeah. Oh, go on.
Well, I'm going to add one thing, which is like the soulful layer. And I'll say, I only, if you subscribe to it or not, that's okay. But what I've also learned, in my journey to understanding me is that, we have karma, right? And like the karma itself and our soul has imprints, and that can be trauma. And so oftentimes like traumatic for us as a human trying to experience it. So sometimes it's not like necessarily the event that is happening to us or the incident, but it's also like our dissonance with the purpose and the fulfillment we feel really deep within our heart, and how we're showing up, and then also how we're being perceived. And so like all of that, and then the valuation we put on it, like the self-worth component, right? But it's like, I want to share that because that has been one of my learnings and lessons too. And that kind of sits in the world of like Akashic record, but whether or not you believe in that or not, or think about it or not, it's just, there is something there that I offer, because it's like in the society we live in and the things that we value, and I know we're growing in value of deep healing. I think that's growing, and I'm really appreciative in our society that is growing, and the mental health piece is growing. But I also know that like, because it seems to be a little bit comparative and sometimes competitive, it can also get lost, like, to Matt, your point, and Maggie, your point, where it's like, well, mine is not that much, so it's not meaningful. And yours is that much, and so it's more meaningful. And I think we can all dance and exist together in that, and like recognize there's so many parts unseen.
I think that's like, there's people, this is like, absolutely, I'm certain this is true. There's people out there that could witness somebody being shot in front of them and probably fare better than someone who watches a cat fall from a window and die, and we're going to say the cat, and I'm an animal lover. So like, like that would be very traumatic for me. Both would be very traumatic for me. It's not, it's not really, it's not really up to somebody else or for us to judge ourselves for how we feel about something that happened. And I think that's really like the work that I really see myself doing in this world in a much bigger way. I grew up in a house with a lot of love. Like, I don't think I ever really questioned whether I was loved. I grew up where there was things that happened that really, really hurt me. And I think that to my, at least as far as it goes right now, I don't remember anything horrible happening. There were things that weren't great, things that were kind of bad. But I think that like I've always told myself like, well, so-and-so's been, I hate to say the word, but they've been raped or something. Like, how can I feel bad for myself when there's people out there that have suffered such worse? Like, we grew up like in my family, like there was a lot of financial lack. And like, I had always told myself like, there was always food on the table. The house was very clean. Like, heat was always on, clean clothes. And then some. It wasn't horrible or anything. But like, it's also true that like, I don't really remember there ever being an extra dollar around for anything. So like, I spent the first 18 years or 15 years till I started working for myself, where I really don't remember there ever being a time when it's like, hey, can I have $20? Sure, Matt, no problem. Like, that was my entire, I don't think there was ever $5 extra for something like that. Like, it was always a like, well, we can give it to you, but you need to do some chores for it, or we can give it to you, but that's going to come at the cost of us going out to dinner on Friday night or something like that. And to live your whole life like that is, think about that. Like, you grow up never, and that's been my story in my entrepreneurship journey. Like, my success, really my first success in terms of like outward successfulness, it's that like I did learn my value financially and I was able to advocate for it. But like, I think so many people out there are like, I'm just making this up, but they're a web designer or something. And they're like, oh, well, I'll do this project for $100, when it's like, I would pay $300 for that. Like, and we're always operating thinking that like, someone did this to me yesterday. Like, it's okay. Like, desiring isn't mutually exclusive to being grateful. So you can be grateful for what you have, but you can also still desire more. You can also still think you're worth more. And
that is so powerful.
And desire is also a Kickstarter to action, right? Like, if you are kind of like in it helps to move us into action as well. It's like aligned action, but that's a really great. I want to put that desire is not mutually exclusive to gratefulness. Is that something?
I think it was gratefulness and desire are not mutually exclusive. That's what they
And not
said.
mutually
That was like,
exclusive. Okay,
yeah.
I'll open that. I want to hear more about how you are, because it also is a bit of a journey. What I'm hearing a lot from you, Matt, is kind of like heart-centeredness. It's like, and I think the more that we come into our own hearts, like the more that we are sharing, the more like we recognize how good it feels to offer ourselves love, the more we want to share it. So I'm sure there was also a moment then where you just like, now you're helping with, like, you know, not that like your business was helping people, like consulting was helping small businesses grow. Like there's value in that. For, like, there's, you know, there's value, we could say. But now you're also working as a coach, right? And you're helping people to like bridge that inner outward like abundance, like I said at the beginning. But also it's a journey into self-love, and
Yeah.
abundance has a lot to do. I think the money wound, it has a lot to do with our own love wounds. They feel hand in hand to me. But how do you like how do you help people now? Like what is it that you're passionate about, like the personal transformation and helping people with abundance? I feel like that keeps coming up a little bit, but I'd love to hear more about how you do that.
Thank you. And yeah, I kind of joked a little bit. Like, I mean, I do think I care a lot more about people these days. And I mean, you know, I mean, people in small businesses than I mean, and I think the corporations and stuff, they have a place in the world. Don't get me wrong. It's just not where my passion is. But yeah, so right now I am working with entrepreneurs. That's one of the offers that I have right now. I'm really trying to help entrepreneurs. And these are people who are successful. They're people who are like already started a business and they aren't charging enough. They don't, it like, I'm at the root of all this is like a self-worth issue. They don't believe that they're worthy of having a 4-hour workday. I mean, that is the way of an entrepreneur a lot of times. You can structure a business that you're not working very much,
Yeah.
and helping them see that they are worth and able to create the life that they want. And this goes from like even, I mean, you know, even a consumer product company, like charging more for their product, showing people what it's worth. It's really, I'm have a deep passion for equality and helping people make a life-changing amount of money. And so I have a mastermind group that I am starting soon that's helping entrepreneurs learn their worth, set boundaries, and advocate for their needs, aligning what they want their business to be, and actually like doing what you know what is authentic to them. I also offer one-on-one coaching for people who are struggling to identify their needs and helping them live a life of more authenticity. So I mean, it's just like for me, it's been mind blowing for me to see like, you know, 10 years ago, I would have told you I don't have a single hobby in the world. I mean, I couldn't identify any interest that I had. And now, like, I think I have probably more hobbies and interests than most people. Like, I don't think I've said I'm bored for a decade.
Yeah.
I love that. And
Yeah.
I feel so one of the things that you've shared in the many places that you do share, which we'll also share here in a little bit, is just, you know, how to value yourself differently. And I think that's at the crux of kind of how you are supporting people to total, that concept of total fulfillment, you know, and that emotional and financial abundance piece. But I am just so intrigued as to like how you think about valuing yourself differently, like how that shows up and what it looks like and what forms it takes and what concepts or paradigms are disrupted as you help people navigate that journey to like self-worth differently.
No one is ever going to value you more than you value yourself. And like, you know, and I am a firm believer in this. Like, you are worth what you think you are. And I'm speaking more to the higher achievers here. This isn't like the 1% of achievers, but the people that are actually accomplishing a lot with their lives. They're great parents, they're great employees, they're great business owners, they're great children, whatever it might be. These are the people that are able to self-motivate, that are really able to achieve a lot. Like, it's been a big learning lesson for me as I become a leader in the business world. And I just thought everyone worked hard and everyone was like able to be as reliable as I am. And I can tell you, like, if you're out there and if you're getting your job done and over delivering on results, you're probably worth literally 10 times what you think you are right now, because like most people cannot do that. Most people are being dragged along. And so my first really like big thing about valuing yourself is in the entrepreneurial world, which is why I've really had a desire to help entrepreneurs, is because like as an entrepreneur, especially as a service provider, if you're providing an excellent service, it is very hard. I mean, most people hire 10 consultants and they might have one that is somebody they'd recommend. So if you are out there and if you are providing really good service, if you're investing in yourself, you are worth a lot more than you think you are. And like in your relationships, your personal relationships too, it's all about like you need to teach people how to treat you. And the fact is like somebody else like the lower you value yourself or the lower your value, somebody else is benefiting from that. They don't have to work as hard to to treat you respectfully, to be compassionate towards you in the work setting. They get to keep more money and give you less. Nobody is going to come to you and say, oh hey, like I know you asked for $200,000 a year for this job, we're going to give you 250 because we think you're great. That'll never happen. And you got to learn to ask for it. And and it's hard, and I think that I mean I don't want to oversimplify it, but I do not think people achieve this kind of valuation, this kind of growth on their own. I think they work with coaches or therapists or in groups with people, but you got to learn that no one's going to value you more than you value yourself.
Yeah. And it's about, I think about this a lot. I don't know if you've read any Caroline May's work, but she talks a lot about personal power. And every interaction is about power, right? So especially in work, it's if you're employed, you give a lot of your power away because there's a lot of fear in the corporate structure of just like authority and obedience. So you fear stepping into your own power out of being, it's like the authority. It's like kind of like the God-fearing complex too. Like we just think that someone can always take from us. So we don't ask or demand, like you said. So it's to me, like what I was hearing you say is a lesson in your own personal power. Like, and people, like once you start to step into that, like once you start to experience it more and you see the changes around you, like when you start to see that you can dictate, right? You can create like a life for yourself in which you decide, like you kind of make the rules, like not in, but you can, like just making small choices, like letting somebody know how you feel, for example, which a lot of people don't do out of fear of how that other person will react, or just again fear of not their own internal confusion because they don't even really know how they feel yet. Like they could, there's different ends of the spectrum, but yeah, it's self-empowerment. And I think that that's such a strong message that you're sharing right now is self-empowerment, and you're sharing it so beautifully. So thank you for that. And I want to hear about your book. I know I would love to hear about your book too, because you're working on a memoir. Is that right?
Yeah. But back to that empowerment thing real quick. It's interesting. Like I was thinking about that and I don't disagree at all. I think that there is a lot of power struggle in the world.
Yeah.
I mean, I hope that I am accurate in saying this. Like, I don't really have in my life, I really try to steer away from relationships where there's a power struggle.
Yeah.
I think going through my mind right now, I don't feel there are any friendships that are in my life right now where like there's a power struggle at all.
Yeah.
And professionally, I've worked hard and am continuing to work to get it to a place. Like I am not a prideful person like that. Like I lead with empathy and compassion and I think like a lot of like traditional management books might say like, be fearless. And like I am like, I'll be the first person and be like, oh my God, guys, the ship is burning. Like I'm worried too. I'm joking a little
Yeah.
bit, but like we're in this
Yeah.
together. Like, and I have
Right.
found that by being honest about that, like it goes a heck of a lot farther than lying. Oh no, everything's fine right now. I'm good. Like that level of empathy, I think that's what today's world is about. A lot more empathy and compassion for people. And I don't know, I guess like at the risk of sounding kind of cheesy, like I would recommend trying to steer clear of relationships that are causing a power struggle the best we can,
Mm-hmm.
and I mean, I think that's a lot of the healing process as we might develop different relationships with our blood families, like where we might not be able to change a power struggle. We can change how we react. I was listening to a podcast last night. on the Glennon Doyle podcast, and
Yeah.
Abby was talking. Abby's like funny. She's like I don't think of her all the time, but like she says some stuff. I'm like, you go, girl. And
Yeah.
she just like was talking about like, you know, her relationship with her parents, and like she's like, I have accepted they're not going to change, and I just choose to spend way less time with them. And
Mm.
talked about healing and just like how like, and I made me remember how my therapist was working with me a couple of years ago, and just like getting me to see that as an adult we have the ability to make our own choices. Like we're no
Mhm.
longer a victim, and we no longer have to put up with our blood family's antics that are against our values, you know?
Mhm.
And I've had to learn that. And that goes to the professional setting too. We always have a choice, and some of
Mhm.
them are really hard. So
Yeah.
I'm not oversimplifying it, but there is always a choice. And that's what healing is about, is learning that you do have a choice as an adult.
Mhm.
And I'm
Yeah.
not oversimplifying it. It is
No,
very
and
hard.
No.
And
I
Yeah.
think that's so spot on. Like, you know, I do think, unfortunately, there is a lot of power dynamic, maybe not necessarily only a struggle, but like there's power dynamics at play, you know, in like interpersonally, intrapersonally, right? And so, like, with all of that, what you made, like the last point you made is so key, right? It's you have to be willing to know yourself and know your value, and kind of circling back to like everything you've shared, right? And then step into the courage to be that version of yourself
Mm.
that then can disrupt and hold those firm boundaries, which say, yeah, you're not for me, or, you know, because you have done that work. And that's the complexity. And there's a lot of ways to go about that work. We've obviously talked about several here today in which like you might find an access point to the inner window. And that, you know, whatever unfolds from there or that journey takes you, we all have different ones, and we all can probably cite different ones that were really profound for us, each of us. But I do think that like self-valuation and that courage comes from like what you have shared, which is just to is like almost like go there, go like heal in whatever ways that seems like the best fit for you right now in this moment today, and follow that thread, you know, like pull on it and then let it go. And you'll continue to accumulate the courage. And then one day you'll kind of show up as like the Matt you sit in front of us, and even Maggie and myself as we sit here today. And we're saying, you know, like, whoa, we see ourselves differently now. And whoa, look at
Mhm.
like the things that we hold in place. And that doesn't mean that that like the ship is not, you know, rocking sometimes. It definitely is, you know, but like it also is like we know how to commit to ourselves and those boundaries.
it's a process. Like I think like that's like the
Mhm.
most like that is like probably the most
Mhm.
important thing I've learned. And it's
Mhm.
honestly been a huge part of my healing. And it's why right
Mhm.
now my boat doesn't really rock very much.
Yeah.
Because it's a process. Like, you know, I had this kind of epiphany the other day, and it's like, I'm not like, I don't go to church. I am spiritual. I'm not exactly sure what that all looks like, but like, it really hit me the other day that it's like, this is why people go to church every week, their whole life.
Yeah.
Like, it is a process and a practice, and you're going to
Mm.
church to be reminded of,
Yeah.
or to get help staying back on track of this
Yeah.
journey to live an imperfect life and be the best you can. And as it relates to like the boundary setting that we were mentioning early, or it's like I mean, I am not perfect at boundaries. There's still plenty of situations that I hope to change in my life, but like it
Mhm.
starts getting easier and easier and easier. And it's not like the boundary gets easier, I would say. It's that you start to realize the consequences of setting a boundary are nowhere near what you think they are. And even
Mm.
if they are sometimes a little bit like scary, you don't want that in your life in the first place. And like going back to what I said about like we're adults, we're able to remedy things. Like
Mhm.
we're all alive here. We've all maintained our lives. And if you lose that job by setting a boundary, you are likely going to find a new one. I mean, whether you have a cushion to do that or not, you need to keep those things in consideration. But like generally, like I always lived my life thinking like I have to be so grateful for what I have. And if I think of pursuing the grass being greener on the other side, I might make a
Mm,
huge mistake and lose everything. And I've learned that
mm.
that is not the case anymore.
Mm.
That
It's
I
not
will
the
be
case.
okay.
Yes, and that's trust. You have to, learning to trust yourself. And I think even that knowing and that trust and that intuition can, when you're in a state of fight or flight, right? If you're just in constant anxiety, you're so cut off from that inner knowing that it feels like life or death, like you've shared, where it's like when your body is in that state, you cannot feel that trust in yourself. But it is something that I'm I'm wanting to help people deepen that trust too, because it is you'll be okay. Like, especially when you make a move in, like, that's you signaling to the universe your worth, right? When you say, I'm worth more than this, you will always be met with something. In my own experience of taking some of changes, you will always be met with something that then equates to your worth. Like, it's like a leveling up, right? You start to attract more of what you say you are, what you kind of attract. You said something like that at the beginning too, Matt, which is like you attract kind of what you are, and which is true.
And
Yeah.
sorry, you asked about the memoir, and I like took a small jump from
Yes,
it,
no,
but
please.
But no, yes, can we circle back to that? Because I do also really want to hear about that before we
yeah.
close.
Oh my gosh, writing a book. This has been like the best, and I don't even want to say. I mean, I want to be totally positive. It's been a totally positive experience, and like the negative parts is that it takes a long time and it's a lot of work. But like honestly, like this book has given me the ability to have patience that I
Mm.
never ever thought I would have. Like, like I'm around people like, oh my God, like I took, this is taking longer. I'm like, "Ugh, think of like, trust me, like a book, you start this and I've been 3 years into the process. I would love to say that a book will be out in the world in 2025, but I would not completely bet on that. It's a process. And I
Yeah.
started, like I don't really have a lot of like, and I don't mean this self-deprecatingly, I don't really have a lot of natural talents. I can't sing or dance. I hate sports. Like, but the book was kind of this one thing that always like I was like, I think I could do this, and I'm smart,
Mhm.
and I think your aptitude allows you to learn how to write a book, where
Mm.
aptitude may not help me be able to throw a basketball.
Yeah. And I like I just feel the need to like emphasize it so much because you're bringing this forward and giving me kind of chills in what you just shared because I myself am like also I did just finish a manuscript for a children's book which I'm super excited about, but there's a part of and there's two things I wanted to share about that. One is like I have been continually being patient with
Oh, you
the
too.
process of that coming through. Like, not the writing of that came easily because it's like not. I don't mean to downplay a children's book. Like, there's not a lot of words. Okay, so it's a picture book. It's not a lot of words. And it's been sitting with me for years. So that's the other truth. Like it's been sitting with me for 3 years. So like let's talk about a process. Maybe it got documented quickly, but it's been 3 years in the making. But also just like even in the publishing process of it all, like I'm just realizing that time like it doesn't have to feel so linear. There's no deadline. There's no like this is my idea. I keep telling if you're familiar with Big Magic or like The Artist's Way or
Yeah.
The Creative Act by Rick Rubin. It's like the idea is I keep saying to myself, this is my idea. It's going to be born through me. And I just talk to her and I say, like, you hold on, I'm holding on, you hold on. And we're going to like get there. Right. And so, but what you inspired me even in when you're like admitting, okay, I've been writing it for this long. I still can't even envision like in 2020, like it may be 2025. Right. I also have another book that I haven't started writing, but like you have inspired me with that. And I think this, like anyone in our audience can take that away where it's like, not everything is going to be born today, and it's okay to love on something and turn down the noise. And of course, all of the ways we talked about, the way to turn down the external radio is like helpful, in managing that patience and creating the patience, right? And Maggie loves that I say this, so I'll say this too, is like, the progress is the process. Like, so is that what I say, Maggie? Or did I say the process? The process is the progress. I say it the other way around. Yeah, I said the other way. You should have just said it right. But it's just, I love that you highlighted that. I know that it's about a book and that might not be something that everybody's trying to do, but I like encourage people who are listening here to think about like the dream they have or the fulfilling idea, the thing that they know like is going to speak from them or be created from them, to know that like, there is nobody, even if there are people knocking on your door, like it's still yours and there is no timeline associated with it. Like it will be where it will be. And you have just demonstrated that so beautifully.
Thank you. And it was interesting hearing you say that because I've read Big Magic and Rick Rubin's book and The Artist's Way. And I have Danny Shapiro has a book, I think, called Still Writing. There's one more on my shelf down there. The Stephen Pressfield, I think it is, Art of War. I kind of forgot how many of these books I've read, and they all have the same message. Like
they do.
It is like a start and stop, and like allow it to breathe, and like so this book for me, long story short, with it, it's just been like I wanted to start. I always wanted to write a book. I didn't really know where this would go. And I hired a writing coach, and I'm very fortunate with who I found. It was a friend of a friend, and she really helped me tell my story. So this was really like probably the biggest vehicle to my healing. I started it during COVID, and I took COVID very, very, very seriously. So I was at home for a big part of this, and it's been just a healing journey to rewrite it. And then so I literally every day I've written for 3 years almost, or 2 years and 11 and a half months. And December of this year I did set it down, and then I read it for the first time. I really, really read the whole book, and I was like, okay, there's parts of this that need to change. And so it's okay. So I guess it's been about 2 months now that it's been marinating, or as Joan Didion calls it, puts it in the freezer. And I opened it the other day and I was like, holy crap. Like there is like a whole book here almost. There is some refining. I am learning how to be a writer. So there is some work to do there, but like the book is more or less put together. But like, it's just like, it teaches you everything. Like it teaches you how to have hope. Like most books don't succeed. Like you keep writing because you think yours is going to. And like one of the things that I love the most was from Big Magic. And Elizabeth Gilbert said, like, if somebody else like puts out your idea, like that's not their fault. Like the idea's in the air and someone's putting it out. So you start to have this like feeling like, well, like what am I going to do? Like, not finish this. But then you have patience and you learn from it. And like literally my patience, I never thought I would have patience like this, but I can tolerate quite a bit of, I'm very patient these days from it, but it's been, I encourage anybody to pursue this. And actually, like, I want to say about the process, like I had this writing coach, I've been working with her for 3 years. I love her. And I've had to it really got to the point where I had to, like, I looked at what I had, I looked at what her and I were doing, and it's like, oh, like this is on me now. And it's like, I know it, you've taught me what I need to do. And like, I need to like sit down and write a chapter, and I need to do this until I am happy with this chapter. I read enough to know like what a good chapter looks like. And so now there's this element of self-trust. And interestingly enough, last night I sat down with my binder and I wrote like a chapter by hand. And I think it's probably like one of my strongest pieces of writing so far, because the buck stops with me now. I gotta just get this done if I want it done. So anyway, thanks for asking me about it.
Of course, we're going to be thoroughly excited when you are in whatever phase you want or ready to share that. And then also, like, of course, to be with you in your release of that, because that's going to be very, very exciting. And I'm sure just absolutely demonstrate the need for healing in, through your words and your lens. So I'm excited whenever we're ready for it. We're here. And is there anything that we didn't mention or didn't prompt here that you feel like you just have to share? It's like a part of you and it needs to come out here.
No, I mean, I think we had a very thorough discussion. I guess just one small like thing on the book thing. Reading is so helpful. Like I feel like
Mhm.
I mean, so many people like don't make time for reading, and I don't want to like say this admonishingly at all, but it's just like I think about this a lot and how like I haven't made a whole lot of mistakes in my life. Like we can say professionally perhaps, like in that, and I think it's because you have like these books, they cost $20 and they're full of people's stories teaching you like all of their mistakes and all of the things that they've done
Yeah.
and would do differently, and it's
Yeah.
like you can learn like everything from other people's stories and like for 20
Yeah.
bucks and you can listen to them on Audible now. I'm just a huge fan of reading and I think
Well,
that's
Yeah.
good.
I'm
It's like so.
Maggie, you probably heard this, but I feel like I need to share it. My husband, Uncut, is like, has like somehow some great, like, talk about a person who's like very self-confident, like in a positive way, self-confident. But he's like, he just walks around, he's like, I don't read. The last time I read was when I was in med school. He's like, I read a book, like it was like,
Everyone.
he's so funny about it. It's like, and he's not like he loves books, he supports them, but he's just so funny how okay he is with walking around being like, he just drops that line like everywhere. You're like, you should probably keep that to yourself. But I guess I'm proud of you for just like owning who you are. Cause he's just like, oh yeah, me read. I don't read. I haven't picked up a book since.
I would say like also like in the same category. I mean, I think you can learn a lot from movies. You can learn a lot from TV shows. Like
Mm.
Yes.
I just think there's
Yes.
a lot of stories out there, and however
Yes.
you want to consume them. I just like I
Great.
think like that it's so funny that we have like all of this like wisdom for virtually nothing
Yes.
in terms of cost, just our time.
Yeah.
And this
Well,
is
and oh,
like
please.
like Glennon Doyle would probably be my favorite author, and she really changed my life. Like she showed me how to embrace the messiness of life and to live
Mhm.
Mm.
vulnerably. And like I don't know that I'd be where I'm at right now if it wasn't for getting. I wouldn't even call it reading. I would call it perspective from other people's
Mhm.
stories, and
Exactly.
Yeah.
learning from other people.
I
Yeah.
literally was gonna say the one just Maggie before I cut you off, and I said like, I just want to like highlight, bring that out where it's like the wisdom of just learning from each other, and however whatever vehicle that is, whether you're just in observation of something transpiring in front of you and having empathy for it, or you're taking it in all of the other ways that you shared. It's like stories are transformational and they can be for you. And so thank you for sharing that nugget because that was really a supportive
Yes.
reframe.
But yeah, nothing else. This has been
And
a
it's
lovely conversation. So thank you very
yes, so
much.
lovely. Thank. So before we head off, where can people find you if they're looking for you?
I would love for
And
you to come check out my website. It's
okay.
mattgerlach.com, and you can schedule a free 30-minute call with me, no obligation. I have a mastermind for entrepreneurs that I am starting very soon. There's more information there. And I publish a weekly blog about vulnerably
Oh,
chronicling what I'm learning in the world. So feel free to join
you-
there as well. And I'm very active on
is
Instagram. I am Matt Gerlach on Instagram.
okay. Is your
Oh,
blog on your website? Because I want to follow it. Yes, it
yes, it
is. I see
is.
it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Love it.
Every
so we
Thursday.
we will ultimately close with one of our favorite and greatest questions, which is, what are you noticing today?
What am I noticing today? I would say that I would say that oh goodness. I mean there's plenty of things. I want to give a good answer. I would say that that like right now I'm sort of in a little bit of a place of identifying exactly what is next for me in the world right now,
Mm.
and like my homework right now is a lot of daydreaming and a lot of journaling, and it's just like so lovely. Not all work has to be hard work. Like this is a place of like where I mean it's a contemplative place, but like the value for someone that like I don't think I ever like sat with myself for 1 second in my 20s at all and mid 30s. I mean up
Mm,
to my mid 30s. So like right now it's just like beautiful to like I took a bath last night with a candle and
mm,
no phone, just sat there in the dark with a candle,
mm,
and like how much the downtime is necessary. It's not you're
Mm,
not wasting time. You're
mm,
there's passive work involved in this.
mm,
So
mm.
mm. Beautiful. Thank
That
you
is
so much.
beautiful. Thank you,
thank you for having
Matt.
me. Thank you.
Okay.